Lugba was a small village, quiet and peaceful, hidden in the hills of the Ephir kingdom. The people lived simple lives, farming, fetching water, and gathering in the evenings to share stories. Everyone knew everyone in Lugba, and news traveled fast. If something happened to one person, by the next morning, the entire village would hear about it. But lately, fear had settled over the village. For months now, young women had been found dead, one after the other. Nobody knew what was killing them, but one thing remained the same: the strange marks on their necks. They looked like snake bites, but no one could say for sure. No one had ever seen a snake near the victims, and the deaths seemed to happen in secret, making them even more terrifying. The village chief, Chief Econ, sent hunters into the bush to find the snake, but they returned empty-handed. The deaths didn't stop, and fear only grew stronger. Mothers warned their daughters not to move around at night. Even in the daytime, women no longer felt safe. The once lively village became quiet, and people grew wary of one another. But there was one person who didn't seem to care about the fear. His name was Obinna. If you asked any woman in Lugba who the finest man in the village was, the answer was always the same: Obinna. Tall and muscular, his body bore the marks of his hard work as a builder. His skin was smooth and dark, and his eyes shone like he always knew something you didn't. His smile alone could make a woman weak. Obinna had the kind of charm that made women forget their fears. When he walked through the village, the women giggled and blushed, hoping he would look their way. And when he did, it felt as if the sun was shining only on them. He knew how to use his looks and sweet words. It wasn't just his fine face, it was the way he spoke, the way he moved, and the way he always seemed to be in control. He could make a woman feel like the only person in the world. But behind all that charm and beauty, Obinna carried a dangerous secret. He didn't care about the fear in the village. He didn't worry about the deaths either. He went about his day as if all was well and good. Obinna knew he was handsome, and he didn't hide it. He walked through the village with confidence, his head held high, his sharp eyes always searching for his next target. The women of Lugba were drawn to him like ants to sugar. Whether at the village well, the market, or the farm, as long as Obinna was nearby, the women couldn't take their eyes off him. But it wasn't just about his looks. Obinna had a way of talking that made any woman feel special. He always knew the right thing to say at the right time. His voice was deep and smooth, like the calm before a storm. And he always knew how to make a woman smile, even when she was feeling down. He never rushed. Obinna took his time, slowly drawing them in, making them trust him, making them want him. If he wanted a woman, he would get her. All it took was one charming smile, a few sweet words, and before long she was his. And once he had her, he would take her to his hut at the edge of the village, away from prying eyes. There, under the soft glow of the moon, Obinna would work his magic. He was gentle, patient, making each woman feel like she was the most important person in the world. But when the night grew darker, Obinna would always ask the same strange question: "Do you know the difference between a man's manhood and a snake?" The women never knew what to say. They would laugh, thinking it was a joke. But before they could answer, Obinna would whistle, a soft, eerie sound that seemed to float in the air. The women would feel uneasy, like something was about to happen. And then it did. Something would shift in the room. Before they could react, they would feel a cold, smooth touch on their skin. A snake, dark and dangerous, would slither out from Obinna's trousers. The women always froze, their fear too strong to scream or run. The snake would wrap itself around them slowly, as if toying with its prey. Then, with a quick strike, it would bite them on the neck. The bite was always the same, two sharp marks like fangs sinking deep into their skin. The venom spread quickly. The women would gasp, their bodies shaking as the poison took hold. Within minutes it was over. They were dead. And Obinna was left standing over their lifeless bodies, his face expressionless. By morning, the woman's body would be found in the village square, cold and pale, with the strange bite marks on her neck. The villagers would gather around, shaking their heads, wondering what kind of snake could do such a thing. But no one ever suspected Obinna. He was too handsome, too charming, too perfect. Each time another woman died, the fear in the village grew. But Obinna didn't care. He continued his life as if nothing was happening. The women still blushed and giggled when he walked by, completely unaware of the danger lurking beneath his good looks and sweet words. Life in Lugba went on, even with fear hanging over the village. The women became more cautious, especially at night, but the daily routine of fetching water, farming, and trading continued. Each time a woman died, people mourned, but nobody had any answers. Chief Econ tried to keep the people calm, but deep down, everyone knew something was terribly wrong. And it wasn't just an ordinary snake causing these deaths. Then one day, a new face appeared in the village. A woman named Nkechi. She was different from the other women in Lugba, tall and graceful, with skin that shone like polished wood. Nkechi carried herself with confidence. Her beauty wasn't just in her face or body, it was in the way she moved, as if she was in complete control. She had come to visit her aunt, who lived on the edge of the village. And almost immediately she caught Obinna's attention. Obinna noticed Nkechi the first time he saw her at the well. Unlike the other women who couldn't help but stare at him or blush when he passed by, Nkechi didn't seem impressed. She didn't giggle. She didn't stare. She didn't even smile at him. Instead, she looked straight past him, her face calm, like she was the one in control of everything. This intrigued Obinna. He wasn't used to being ignored, and Nkechi's calmness felt like a challenge. He had always been able to win over any woman he wanted, and he wasn't about to let Nkechi be the first to resist him. From that moment, Obinna decided he had to have her. Obinna began to watch Nkechi more closely. He noticed that she was always polite but never too friendly. She spoke kindly to people but never allowed anyone to get too close. This only made Obinna want her more. He wasn't just drawn to her beauty, he was fascinated by her mystery, by her strength. The more he watched her, the more determined he became. Obinna wasn't used to failure, and he wasn't about to start now. He began to follow Nkechi, looking for opportunities to speak with her, to charm her as he had done with so many others. But each time he approached her, Nkechi kept her distance as if she knew something he didn't. One afternoon, Obinna found his chance. Nkechi was at the well, filling her water pot, and there were fewer people around. Obinna walked up to her, his usual confident smile in place. "Nkechi," he said smoothly, his voice deep and sweet like honey. "Let me help you carry that." Nkechi glanced at him, her face expressionless. She didn't look impressed by his charm, and that only made Obinna more eager. He waited for her to giggle or blush like the others, but instead she simply nodded. "If you insist," she said calmly, stepping back to let him take the pot. Obinna felt a small victory. He lifted the pot with ease and placed it on his head, making sure to show off his strength. As they walked to her aunt's house, Obinna tried to make small talk, but Nkechi remained quiet. She answered his questions politely but gave nothing more than necessary. This wasn't what Obinna was used to, but he told himself it was only a matter of time before she fell for him. All the women eventually did. "She's just playing hard to get," he thought. "I just have to work a little harder with this one." After that day at the well, Obinna couldn't get Nkechi out of his mind. She wasn't like the other women of Lugba. Most of them would have melted under his smile, giggling and blushing. But not Nkechi. She was different. The more distant she remained, the more obsessed Obinna became. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to a woman not giving him the attention he was accustomed to. It was new. It was frustrating. And it made him want her even more. Obinna had always been able to get any woman he wanted with little effort. Just a flash of his smile, a few smooth words, and the women of Lugba were his. They were all the same, soft, eager, easy to seduce. She wasn't falling for his tricks. She seemed immune to his charm. And that drove Obinna crazy. Day after day, he watched her, when she fetched water, when she walked through the market, even when she visited the farm with her aunt. Nkechi carried herself with a quiet strength that made her stand out. She didn't seem to care about anyone's opinion, least of all Obinna's. She lived her life peacefully, and that only made her more attractive to him. Obinna started finding excuses to talk to her. At first, it was little things, offering to help carry her load, trying to make small talk, searching for any way to get her attention. But no matter what he did, Nkechi stayed polite but distant. Her calmness was beginning to bother him. One evening, Obinna couldn't take it anymore. He decided he needed to do more, to take control of the situation. He couldn't let Nkechi continue to slip through his fingers. He had never failed with a woman before, and he wasn't about to start now. Obinna knew that Nkechi often visited her aunt's small farm just outside the village, where they grew yams and vegetables. So he decided to wait for her there. It was a warm evening, and the sun was beginning to set, casting a soft orange glow over the fields. Obinna leaned against a tree, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes focused on the path leading to the farm. Finally he saw her. Nkechi was walking slowly, her steps steady and graceful. A basket of yams rested on her head, her back straight, her face calm as always. As she approached, Obinna stepped forward, blocking her path. "Nkechi," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "You've been avoiding me?" Nkechi raised an eyebrow and looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "I've been doing no such thing, Obinna. I've just been busy." Her response irritated him. Obinna wasn't used to being brushed off like this. He was used to women being excited to see him, not acting as if he didn't matter. But he forced a smile, trying to keep his cool. "You're always so serious," he said, taking a step closer. "Why don't you let me walk with you? We could get to know each other better." Nkechi gave him a long, unreadable look. For a moment, Obinna thought she might actually agree. But then she shook her head, stepping around him. "I'm not interested, Obinna." Her words were simple, firm. Obinna stood there, stunned. He wasn't sure if he was more shocked or angry. How could she just walk away from him like that? Nobody had ever said no to him before. His pride felt bruised. But more than that, his obsession with Nkechi only grew stronger. He couldn't let her slip away so easily. No, she would be his, no matter what it took. As Nkechi walked away, Obinna's eyes darkened. He made a promise to himself right then and there. He would have her. And she wouldn't be able to resist him for long. Obinna's frustration grew as Nkechi continued to resist him. He was used to women falling for him quickly, but Nkechi wasn't like the others. The more she ignored his advances, the more obsessed he became. He knew he had to change his approach. This time he decided to be patient, to play the long game. Instead of showering her with attention like before, Obinna pulled back. He stopped following her around and barely spoke to her when they crossed paths. It didn't take long for Nkechi to notice the change. She had expected him to keep trying. But now he seemed distant, almost uninterested. The shift in Obinna's behavior worked. After days of watching him from a distance, Nkechi became curious. One evening, as he sat outside his hut sharpening his tools, she finally approached him. "You've been quiet lately," Nkechi remarked, her tone calm but curious. Obinna simply nodded, keeping his answers short and his face expressionless. He knew this would draw her in. After a few moments of silence, Obinna suggested a walk, and Nkechi agreed, her guard lowering slightly. As they walked, Obinna kept the conversation light, just enough to make her comfortable. He wanted her to believe that he was a changed man, that he was more than the charming, attention-seeking womanizer she had assumed him to be. And slowly it seemed to work. Obinna had played his cards right, and now Nkechi's defenses were lowering. She no longer looked at him with suspicion, and her once guarded responses softened. Obinna could sense that the moment he had been waiting for was near. His patience had paid off. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Obinna decided it was time to act. He invited Nkechi to his hut, suggesting they share a quiet evening together. Nkechi, now more comfortable around him, agreed. The air was still, and the village seemed almost too quiet as they made their way to his hut on the outskirts of Lugba. Inside, the flickering light from a small oil lamp cast soft shadows on the walls. Obinna offered her a seat and poured her some palm wine, his voice calm and soothing as they talked. Nkechi sipped the wine slowly, her eyes watching him carefully, but no longer with the sharpness of before. Obinna smiled inwardly, knowing that the moment was finally his. He moved closer, gently brushing his fingers against her hand, and began to speak in that low, seductive voice he was known for. "Nkechi," he said softly, "I've been thinking about you. You're different from the others, strong, independent." Nkechi smiled faintly, still relaxed, but Obinna could see the effect his words were having. He leaned in a little closer, his voice now almost a whisper. "Do you know the difference between a man's manhood and a snake?" Nkechi's brows furrowed slightly, confused by the sudden question. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, Obinna began to whistle. The sound was soft at first, barely noticeable, but it grew louder, filling the room with an eerie tune. Nkechi shifted in her seat, suddenly uneasy. But it was too late. From the shadows, a dark shape began to stir. Nkechi's eyes widened as she saw it, a snake, long and menacing, slithering out from Obinna's trousers. Its cold, smooth scales glistened in the dim light as it coiled around her. Obinna watched, his face expressionless, as the snake prepared to deliver its deadly bite. But something was different this time. Though terrified, Nkechi suddenly reached into the folds of her wrapper and pulled out a small white flute. Without a moment's hesitation, she blew into it. The sound that came out was sharp, piercing, and filled the air with a strange energy. Obinna's eyes widened in shock as the snake froze mid-strike. It hesitated, confused, its eyes now locked on Nkechi instead of its usual prey. She blew the flute again. This time, the snake slowly turned away from her and slithered back toward Obinna. Obinna stumbled backward, fear flashing across his face for the first time. The snake, now under Nkechi's control, coiled around him, tightening its grip. Obinna gasped, struggling for breath as the serpent constricted, its fangs hovering near his neck. How did you?" Obinna stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Nkechi's face was calm, her eyes cold and steady. "You're not the only one who knows how to control a snake," she said. "It's time you paid for your wicked acts. And also, remember to say hello to Nkem." Obinna's eyes widened in horror. Before he could respond, the snake struck, sinking its fangs into his neck. The venom spread quickly, paralyzing him almost instantly. His body convulsed, his breathing grew shallow, and the life drained from his eyes. Nkechi stood over him, her expression unreadable as Obinna's body went still. The snake loosened its grip and slithered away into the darkness, leaving Obinna lifeless on the floor. Long before Nkechi ever set foot in Lugba, her heart was heavy with grief and anger. The reason she had come to the village wasn't just to visit her aunt, it was to find answers. A few months earlier she had lost her closest friend, Nkem, in one of the mysterious deaths that had shaken the nearby villages. The pain of losing Nkem had cut deep. Nkechi had made a vow to herself, she would find the person responsible. Nkem and Nkechi had grown up together, inseparable since childhood. Nkem was full of life, always laughing, always bright. They had shared everything, their dreams, their fears, their deepest secrets. And then one day she was gone. Her death had been sudden, unnatural, her body found lifeless in the same way so many other women had been. No wounds, no struggle, just gone. But Nkechi knew the truth. She had found the signs, the hidden tracks, the whispers of dark magic. She had traced the deaths back to one man, Obinna. He had charmed his way into the lives of many women, pretending to love them, only to use them for his sinister rituals. But not this time. Not her. Nkechi had come to Lugba prepared. And tonight, justice had been served. As the night deepened, Nkechi walked out of Obinna's hut without looking back. The village remained still, unaware that one of its darkest secrets had just been erased from existence. She had done what she came for. Now it was time to leave. One evening, Nkem had confided in Obena, her voice filled with excitement. "I'm seeing someone new," she had said, a dreamy look in her eyes. She described him as tall, handsome, and charming, a man who made her feel like the only woman in the world. But there was something else, something she couldn't quite put into words. "He's different, Obena. Mysterious." She never mentioned his name. 2 weeks later, Nkem was found dead. Her body lay cold and pale in the village square, strange bite marks on her neck, just like the others before her. The village mourned her loss, but no one had answers. Obena was devastated, and her grief quickly turned into suspicion. Who was this man Nkem had been seeing? Why hadn't she told Obena his name? And why did no one seem to know anything about him? She couldn't let it go. Obena knew her friend's death wasn't some random accident. It had to be connected to this mysterious man. Her instincts screamed that something dark was at play. So she began asking questions, quietly, carefully. She traced the recent deaths, following every whisper, every rumor. And soon her search led her to Uka, the oracle's warning. When Obena arrived in Uka and saw Chima for the first time, she knew. His looks, his charm, the way he commanded attention, it all fit Nkem's description. Chima was the kind of man who could seduce any woman. And Obena's instincts told her he was hiding something. But she couldn't confront him directly. He was too careful, too clever. If she wanted the truth, she had to play his game. She had to let him believe she was just another woman drawn to his charm. She had to make him think he was winning. But all the while, Obena was watching. Waiting. Before coming to Uka, she had sought the guidance of a powerful oracle in her home village. The deaths were too strange, too similar to be the work of an ordinary snake. The oracle was known for seeing beyond the physical world, for uncovering hidden truths. And Obena hoped she would have the answers. Inside the oracle's hut, the air was thick with the scent of burning herbs, the walls lined with ancient symbols. Obena explained everything, Nkem's mysterious death, the bite marks, the strange man her friend had mentioned. The oracle listened in silence, her eyes closed as if she were peering into a world unseen. Finally she spoke. "There is a man," she said in a low, raspy voice, "whose manhood is not like that of ordinary men. He carries a snake within him, a serpent of seduction and death. It is his weapon, his curse. With it he lures women into his bed. And once they are under his spell, the snake strikes. The venom kills swiftly, leaving only the marks behind." A chill ran through Obena. She had suspected something dark, but this? A snake man capable of charming women into their own deaths? It sounded impossible. But the bodies were real. The deaths were real. She had no choice but to believe. "Is there any way to stop him?" she asked, steadying her voice. The oracle nodded. "There is a way. But it is dangerous. She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. You must use his own weapon against him. The snake responds to a specific sound, a whistle he uses to summon it. But with the right tool you can control the snake. I will give you a flute, a sacred instrument. If you play it at the right moment, the snake will obey you, not him. The oracle handed Obena a small silver flute, no bigger than her hand. It looked simple, but as she touched it, she felt the power within. This was her only chance. The oracle's eyes darkened. But be warned, he is clever. He will try to seduce you to make you trust him. You must let him believe he has won. Only then can you strike. With the flute in hand and a plan forming in her mind, Obena set off for Uka. She was ready. Justice in the village square. By morning, the village of Uka buzzed with whispers. The villagers gathered in the square, their faces filled with shock and disbelief. Chima, the man they had admired, the man they had trusted, lay lifeless in the center of the square. Beside him, his snake, his deadly secret, coiled in death, its head severed. Obena stood before the villagers, her face calm, her heart heavy. She had done what she came to do. She had avenged Nkechi. She had brought an end to the terror that had haunted the women of Uka. The village was silent as she spoke. I am not just an ordinary visitor, she said, her voice clear and steady. I came here with a mission, to find the man responsible for my friend Nkechi's death and to put an end to the killings. She looked at the faces before her, the women who had once giggled and blushed in Chima's presence, now standing in shock. Chima was not what he seemed. He was the cause of the deaths in this village. He used his snake, his manhood, hidden inside him, to seduce and kill women. A ripple of horror spread through the crowd. They had never suspected Chima. The handsome, charming builder, the man who had lived among them for years, had been a monster in disguise. Murmurs of disbelief turned to silence. Some women bowed their heads in shame, realizing how close they had come to falling victim to his deadly seduction. But now the truth was clear. Chima's reign of terror was over, and the village was free. The legend lives on. Years passed. The story of Chima and his serpent became legend in Uka. Mothers told the tale to their daughters, warning them of the dangers of falling for charm without knowing a man's heart. The tale of Chima became a lesson, a reminder that not everything beautiful is good, that sometimes, the greatest dangers hide behind the sweetest smiles. Obena's name became one of honor throughout the kingdom. She was spoken of with reverence. She had outsmarted a monster. She had saved countless women from suffering the same fate as Nkechi. Her name was whispered with pride by the women of Uka, and her story was passed down from generation to generation. As for Chima, his name was forgotten, buried in the dust of history. No one spoke of him anymore, except as a warning to those who might use charm and deceit for evil. The village of Uka thrived once more. The fear was gone. The women were safe. And though the past was never forgotten, life carried on, stronger, wiser, and free.
Thank you for joining me on this storytelling adventure. If you find my stories valuable, don't forget to let me know by liking the video and leaving a comment. Your thoughts mean the world to me. And here's a tip. You might not find me again in the vast sea of YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let us reach 1,000 subscribers together, that way I would be able to continue dropping mind-blowing stories. And you will also be part of my growth. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep imagining, and stay curious. Thank you.